in the immigration realm. First of all, you've got uh, Mayor Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, very upset and telling members of immigration and customs enforcement that they need to stop what they're doing. And by that, she means stop enforcing the law. They had an operation where they were going through a park in Los Angeles and they were picking up illegals. The details of this, I'm still reading up on specifically how many people they took into custody, but they had this operation where they were going to get illegals, and the mayor of Los Angeles shows up and says that this needs to stop. This is her. This is at MacArthur Park as federal agents are raiding the area. This is cut four. Listen to this.
Any comment, Mayor Bass?
Thank you.
Mayor Bass, any comment?
Yes, my comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now. They need to leave because this is unacceptable.
No, actually, Clay, they don't need to leave. They're enforcing the law. Their federal agency has no authority to stop them, to order them, to do anything to them. And if she tries, she's breaking federal law, which Los Angeles is still a part of the United States and therefore falls under federal jurisdiction. And there's just none of this nonsense that we should be accepting. I want to get into also some of the way the rhetoric that's out there is creating dangers. I saw those two ambush attempts. One time, ICE member shot in the neck. We'll talk about that in a second. Clay, they really think that the law doesn't count somehow in these sanctuary cities, that there's some argument to be made that federal law has no real bearing on what's going on just because they say so. This is a very important moment in the rule of law for this country.
Yeah, and again, it goes to the very basics of the Supremacy Clause, which is why I don't really even understand what the attempt is here. The United States president controls immigration law. And so we had this discussion because Gavin Newsom, remember when he was making a big show of, hey, the president doesn't have the ability to call out the guard here in the state of California. And there was one federal district court judge that agreed, and then it immediately got slapped down by the Ninth Circuit. We came on and said this is kind of a foundational issue. It is a foundational issue that the president of the United States has control over immigration law across the entirety of the country, whether it's a blue state or a blue city or not. And a part of me thinks, and tell me if, because I'm trying to think of this strategically. The only way this makes sense is if you just are desperate to be arrested by the president of the United States, because that helps you politically when it comes to your standing in the Democrat Party. This in no way actually benefits the city. It certainly doesn't benefit the state. Look, have you ever seen a study on this? Because I would love to see a study on this. Mamdani got elected in New York City, and I see these as all connected, or got the nomination for the Democrat Party in New York City for the mayorship by basically arguing rent is too expensive. We need to freeze rent. And really, he argued products are too expensive. Life is too expensive in New York City. You lived in New York City for a while. I don't know what the numbers would reflect. JD Vance made this argument a bit on the debate against Tim Walz, and then it got shot down. Didn't get much attention beyond that. What would it do to rent if there were no illegal immigrants in New York City?
Well, I believe that the laws of supply and demand still matter, even when Democrats wish they wouldn't. So, yes, there would be more housing that would open up. This is true in New York City. This is true nationwide. The same way that they say, who's going to work in the meat plant once the illegals have been removed from it? Americans. That's actually what
Yes.
happens.
That's how supply and demand
this
works.
Yeah, this has been fascinating because the rhetorical question that they think they're asking actually has an answer. Who's going to take these jobs? Americans who get paid on the books and a real wage.
So I would love the fact that we've never really seen a study, and maybe some of you have. If we have, according to Tom Homan, 20 million illegals in the United States, that's what he told me a couple of months ago he thought was the actual number. Now, some of you are going to say, hey, I think it's 30 or I think it's 40 or whatever the number is. Tom Homan said 20, so I'm going to use 20 as a rough approximation. Those numbers are overwhelmingly slotted in cities like New York, Chicago, and LA. What would
It-
rents do if you just eliminated illegal immigrants from the rental universe? To your point, natural laws of supply
oh
and
well.
demand would suggest they would come down substantially.
It's even worse than that. Unfortunately, the city of New York has some of the most oppressive and anti property owner laws in the entire country. And there's also rent control, which is
Yes.
just a government mandated spoil system that people abuse. And I'm sorry if some of you live in rent controlled apartments, good for you, but you're actually kind of milking the system. That's just the truth. My first, my girlfriend when I was in high school, she lived in a rent controlled apartment. And when her parents told me what she was paying, I remember I was like, wow, they're paying like a couple $100 a month for a huge apartment. I was like, that's
Yep.
weird. So look, it's a spoils system and it artificially raises the cost of housing the same way that illegal immigration raises the cost of housing. Here's another one, Clay. They estimate, and they have pretty good numbers on this because they have to bill people. 30% of emergency room visits in New York City last year were illegal immigrants. 30.
Yeah.
So if 30% of the ER visits are illegals, now I know you say, oh, but they don't have access to frontline care. That's why they're going. Yeah, but what would happen if you didn't have those illegals? You'd have a whole lot more ER capacity, wouldn't you? You'd have much shorter ER waits, wouldn't you? The same concepts, the same ideas apply to housing, apply to employment, apply because supply and demand is a real thing.
Which is why I think Republicans should start making that argument. Because there are a lot of people out there who feel like goods cost way more than they used to. And that's the function of inflation. Inflation comes down, it doesn't ever go away. It's like putting on weight. You eventually have to, you don't ever get typically negative cost of goods. So you're trying to get around 2% a year. It's still going to add up. I saw our friend Jesse Kelly shared something that since COVID, $100,000 today, $100,000 in 2020, you need 125K today to have the same purchasing power. Basically, everything costs about 25% more than it did in 2020, which is a function of inflation because we judge inflation on a year to year basis, not on a multi-year basis. So that 9% inflation got perpetually embedded. And so really goods have increased in value by about the cost of them has increased by about 25% just over the last 5 years.
And you look at what happens when the government starts playing this game of influencing the numbers in the market, whether it's for housing or employment, playing these games by allowing illegal immigrants to get work papers and all these things. It has tremendous cost. Obamacare, this has been largely forgotten, was supposed to bring down the cost of health care. Everybody, do you remember that? Does anybody remember that was the big promise? Yeah, you're all going to be covered, quote unquote, but it's going to bring down the cost of healthcare. It didn't do that. Healthcare is actually just getting more expensive all the time. It's super heavily regulated and it is more expensive. Kind of like housing stock in Los Angeles. Very hard to build new homes in LA, new apartment buildings, a million different environmental and union and local regulations. Same thing is true in New York City. These
Yes.
places are infringing on the market and causing huge problems. So, yes, with the illegals, despite what Mayor Bass says, they're called illegals, once again, for a reason because they're breaking the law. And I think Tom Homan really got to this when he said that they're arresting non criminals. He's like, they're not allowed to be here. The whole point is that this is cut 10. He's like, we're arresting the people who are not supposed to be in the United States. That is the fundamental problem.
Yeah. And that
Cut
is,
10.
If you're in the
yeah.
country legally, you're not off the table. I mean, I see people, saying we're arresting non-criminals. Well, they're in the country legally. That's our job. And we told ICE agents in the process going out looking for the bad guy. And this is the problem with sanctuary cities. When we go to the community to go find the criminal, many times they're with others that may not be a criminal target, but they're in the United States illegally. They're coming too. We're going to force immigration law. Unlike the last administration where Secretary Mayorkas instructed ICE, you can't arrest an illegal alien for simply being here illegally. They got to be arrested or be convicted of a serious criminal offense. He rewrote the law. That's not what the law says. We're going to enforce law. That's what the people put President Trump in office to do, and that's what we're doing.
Enforce the law.
And we have shut down the border. But again, if you take Tom Homan at his word and there's 20 million illegals here, even at 3,000 deportations a day, it would take decades to get that 20 million out of the country. That's the reality. That's why Tom Homan just said, hey, we need to bump those numbers up to 7,000 a day. We'll talk more about this. But I do think the only thing that makes sense for Karen Bass is she's hoping to get arrested. Gavin Newsom's hoping to get arrested. He actually called out for it because they see it as ultimately beneficial in the Democrat Party, even if it's actually detrimental to their city and state, which is a sad place to be.